Why did Steven Avery not clean his blood out of the car? I've been doing extensive research about Steven Avery's blood in the RAV for the last 10 months now to try to decide whether it was planted or not. I haven't really found any evidence it was planted, but one thing that doesn't make sense to me is why would Steven bleed in the RAV and not clean any of the blood out of it? There was roughly 1 to 2 milliliters of blood found in the RAV. If Steven had been bleeding enough to drip 1 to 2 milliliters, I'd imagine his finger would have been hurting. And he'd most likely have noticed if that amount of blood was dripping off his hand. So it seems reasonable to me that if Steven bled in the RAV he would have known he was bleeding. So why didn't he clean any of the blood up? Some people would argue that he was planning to crush the car and so he didn't need to clean the blood out. But this doesn't make sense to me because he wouldn't be able to crush the car at night because he'd risk someone waking up and hearing it and finding out what he was doing. And of course he couldn't crush it in the day because one of his family members could have easily found out. They were working on the salvage yard. So he'd have to crush the car when there was no family on the property. The family were planning to go to Crivets on Saturday, November 5, 2005. They apparently always go on Saturday. However, Earl was going to be staying at the salvage yard while the rest of the family were at Crivets and Steven knew this. So it doesn't make much sense that Steven put the car on the property ready to be crushed. Any thoughts on why he didn't clean any of the blood out of the car? You mean like the faint glow of luminol? What about it? The state's own forensic expert stated that wasn't the type of reaction he would expect to see from bleach. Which is why Kratz outright lied to the jury in closing about his testimony. Don't forget he bleeds blood flakes too. But he was a genius cleaner because where they say the murder or murders took place none of Teresa's DNA was found. In the house, trailer or garage if you believe Brendan's confession is true, or maybe they just killed her twice. The story Weigert and Fassbender were peddling to poor slow Brendan and pushed him into confessing killing in the garage. Look, Avery would have dumped the car and set it on fire. Question: why would you possibly leave her car where you live? Even if Steven wasn't a Rhodes Scholar he would have known enough to get rid of it, far away from his home base. If you commit a crime like this, then the only reason you don't destroy the car and every other damn thing is if you've worked out a planting scheme to frame someone else, a fall guy. No damn way anyone is going to keep evidence with blood in it hanging around, no way. You take it far away or torch the damn thing, period. Bye bye RAV 4, bye bye evidence. No, Steve is supposed to keep the RAV on the property and the key to same in his bedroom. Completely stupid. He's supposed to kill her in his bedroom, cut her throat, strangle, rape her, just plain stupid. Also, all this on the eve of getting a king's ransom of lawsuit money he was already planning on getting, so just plain stupid. Then so the story goes, according to Weigert and Fassbender, wild imaginings. Now Brendan and Steve drag this poor woman out of his trailer to the garage when she is already supposed to be dead or dying. Your choice, both stories are court tested. But wait, there's more. Let's throw her in her RAV to go 20 feet to the garage. Oh, and obviously she was bleeding at this point profusely like a f***ing sieve because blood splatter was all over the back door of the RAV. Somehow the back door gets a spray all the hell over it. This is one messy murder scene. Anyone question in an ocean of her blood? Does any of this nonsensical story make any sense whatever when none of her blood or DNA was found in either the trailer or garage? It's pure bullshit. Ed. Note: except the minute amount on the pristine bullet, there would have been blood all over Avery's trailer, all over the garage, his clothes, Brendan clothes, and oh by the way, Brendan faints at the sight of blood. But never mind, blood every damn where. Think about it, just every damn where. Now they arrive at the garage all covered in blood, and what have you? Body fluids. Where Avery goes all Rambo and pumps 10 shots into her dead or alive body. Does this make any sense at all? Next, this bloodied, hacked up, shot 10 times bleeding body is then carried to the fire and thrown on whole, according to Weigert and Fassbender, through Brendan. Now I've heard whoppers before, but excuse me, this is so fucking ludicrous. Just how did the body get all sawed up after she was toasted and spread around in the quarry and Cuss Road and burn barrels in Avery's burn area? There are just so many moving parts that just don't fit together. Still, people defend this. They are true believers on questioning that the state and the cops would never lie. Just keep the blinders on, folks, strapped in for the ride. If Steven wants to dismantle the RAV as they did before placing vehicles into the crusher, I think he would have to do it alone, with gloves and long sleeves to avoid leaving blood and or prints, some sort of hat and tight clothes to avoid getting any body hair on the crushed vehicle. He had 5 days, according to Wiegert. If he did not crush it after a helicopter flew by his residence, or after 3 cops came to his house and 2 nights back-to-back with newscasters asking for the whereabouts of TH, and on top of it he took off to Crivets, I would say he wasn't planning to crush anything. All I can think of is that after being released by DNA evidence, he forgot that bit about the importance of the evidence and decided to hide the car poorly. Yes, but he tried and waited. And waited and kept waiting until Saturday because he knows they're all leaving to Crivets. Perhaps KK could have made a case for that idea. He leaves with them but comes back to the yard to dismantle it in peace. Earl did not live in Assy, so that's one way he could have planned it. Even if Teresa showed up in the news Thursday night and the timming sucks, he still has to wait to Saturday for all to leave. He's stuck waiting till he's back from Crivets. Steven was never in the ROV. He was consistent at times, and couldn't be convinced to lie. How can anyone say he couldn't be convinced to lie? He was convinced to lie in November, when he caved to interrogators' demands to say he saw TH taking pics when he hadn't. He didn't clean the blood out of the ROV because he didn't know the blood was there. Does it make sense that someone could be so very thorough, down to the finest crack and crevice of his trailer and garage, especially, and clean every piece that could have and would have had blood spatter on it, all the way down to the concrete, and yet, they luminaled the garage and found no traces of blood, but somehow he miraculously misses what would be the most obvious contact stain there is, right in front of his face. With no sign of cleaning anything up. The entire story makes zero sense when you peel back just a single layer of the BS that the state wants you to look at. Agree entirely. And if he left drips of blood, so wasn't wearing gloves, how did he manage to leave 0 fingerprints? The prosecution story makes no sense at all. I agree as well. And the way our system's supposed to work is innocent until proven guilty. And there is simply too many holes beyond any doubt to put this man away for life. This case was a perfect example of the state thinking he was guilty from the get-go. I have no doubt that the judge thought he was guilty before anything was presented to him. There's nothing subtle at all about the crime scene and ROV, is there? Not even a simple hair strand of TH in the trailer we could debate. Could it be evidence of a crime? There's nothing unclear or debatable or open to interpretation like you expect to see in a real-life crime. Instead, it seems SA only forgot to clean up/hide the extremely obvious slam-dunk incriminating evidence that would definitely send him to jail. The whole thing is like a cheap remake of some Twilight Zone episode. Could be so very thorough, down to the finest crack and crevice of his trailer and garage, especially. Or the state's crime theory is wrong. Which is highly likely and doesn't preclude a conviction. Great points. The old'd believe he's guilty if there were less evidence of his guilt argument, always a crowd pleaser. Not so much. It's incredibly interesting to me that everyone piles on how dumb Avery is, but he was able to clean his trailer and garage in immaculate fashion, only somehow missing the key and the bullet. Especially considering Brendan's confession that was used to paint the picture of a truly violent crime in a press conference. Brendan said they cut her hair but there were no strands of hair ever found, which seems impossible. This isn't defending anyone or claiming guilt or innocence. It's just weird that someone with low intelligence made sure to clean his trailer and garage so well, try to scatter bones across many different places, use a fire to incinerate anything else left behind, but never thought to clean or get rid of a vehicle that would easily get him caught. It's just really weird to me. If he were such a cleaning savant, I would think he would have made sure the car was immaculate as well. Also, he really left behind a ton less evidence than much smarter murderers than him. Again, this is simply an exercise in how strange it is to be so thorough but so lacking at the same time. For some reason I don't know, the state had to move on with the crime taking place in his garage and/or bedroom, even if that meant they had to take the monumental task of explaining why their own lab tech told them there's nothing here, boys. That's what always bothered me about it. Avery is the dumbest in the state of Wisconsin, but he hid everything well. Except in the car of the victim. The family is trying to save him by giving false testimony, but he couldn't crush the car if they were present. We don't know exactly where and how Steven killed Teresa. And he's never been able to keep his story straight either. He was found guilty of murder, not murder in an exact place or room. He left behind his blood in the victim's vehicle, The victim's remains in the burn pit behind his house, the key to her vehicle was in his room, and a bullet that was found to be fired from the gun that hung above Steven's bed was found with the victim's DNA on it. That's a lot of evidence. He didn't do a very good job of covering up. Steven never touched Teresa. According to Kratz, we do. He presented Brendan's confession in a press conference as fact to what happened. So we know the places everything happened according to the DA. You are right that he was not convicted for where it happened, but it seems odd to search his trailer and garage so much if that wasn't where it was believed to have happened. Again, Brendan's confession was not used in Avery's trial, but it was presented as factual and as what happened to the public at Kratz's press conference. So again, it's weird that multiple searches of the trailer didn't turn up anything until finally a key fell out of somewhere that had been searched and moved before. The bullet wasn't found until after multiple searches of the garage and no evidence of the murder occurring there either. Again, this is not claiming Avery's innocence or guilt. I said that before and I'm saying that to you again. To want to argue the evidence and the conviction are not things I'm even arguing about. I'm simply pointing out how it's a strange thing that someone with low intelligence was able to do such a great job at cleaning certain areas while ignoring a completely different piece of huge evidence. I'm not sorry that I find that interesting. So one more time, I didn't say it was planted. I am not arguing innocence or the conviction. I'm saying that it's odd/weird is all. You are free to believe what an attorney says if you want. I prefer to look at the actual evidence. For me, an attorney saying something doesn't make it fact. Look at Zellner calling all the victims of serial rapist Daniel Holdsclaw liars. Doesn't make it true. I have a better question for you. How come he has no fingerprints anywhere on the car but there is blood from his hand? If he were wearing gloves, then there would not be blood either? Well, you're not necessarily going to leave prints in a car if you enter the car without gloves. It's possible to touch something and leave no detectable prints on it. Fair, but I would say you have to be naive to think they wouldn't have recovered his prints anywhere. Well, I'm not sure about that. There have been cases where the owner of a car has left little to no prints in the car. Here's a video that talks about it. YouTube link. There was also a post on here some time ago created by a fingerprint examiner who said that he wouldn't expect there to be any prints in the RAV4 if Steven had been in it, that it's very possible to touch things and leave no prints on them. There are very few surfaces inside a vehicle where latent prints would be viable. Exceptions being glass on the windows or any other very smooth surface. You'd also have to touch those surfaces perfectly without wiping across them. The outside of the vehicle was exposed to the elements. Any latent prints that may have been there would have been destroyed quickly. Very interesting. What about plastics inside the car or on the wheel? Same for that? Or the hood latch? Those were the main surfaces I always considered. What about plastics inside the car or on the wheel? Most of those are marbled. They don't take prints that well unless you put your hand directly on them, with the print leaving portions flat. Plastic inside the car like the dashboard, steering wheel, etc. are porous surfaces where a print would not be left. The hood latch might be possible. But he may not have used the tip of a finger to press it. Or may have done a wiping motion as he pushed it, which would not have left a print. But would have left DNA, which I think they did find there. They did find DNA on latch, but the prosecution said it was sweat, which allegedly rarely produces enough DNA to be detectable. Ike though. But thanks for the info. You're welcome. This case has fascinated me since it came out. They did find DNA on latch. Incredible they could still pull a full DNA profile 5 months later and after multiple others had handled the latch as well. Is that a red flag, you think? Definitely. Well, the prosecution has no way of knowing whether it is or isn't sweat because there's no DNA test in existence that can identify whether a DNA sample was left by sweat or not. Sweat from the hand usually does not leave enough DNA to be detectable. Only blood, saliva, urine, or semen does. But the prosecution claimed it was from sweat. With what we know now about DNA evidence means it likely isn't. Especially with how strong the sample was. Any thoughts on why he didn't clean any of the blood out of the car? Because he never saw the RAV4 after she drove it off his property. I mean, anyone who's had a bleeding cut knows that it doesn't leave marks like the RAV had. It's ridiculous, it looks entirely like it was swabbed on with a Q-tip. But if it had been created with a Q-tip, it should be able to be recreated by smearing a Q-tip against a dashboard. Stuart James and Kathleen Zellner did try to recreate the stain by wiping a Q-tip against a dashboard, and they created several stains, but none of them looked similar to the stain on Teresa's dashboard. Here is a side-by-side comparison. Link. Hello? Police say the pic you are seeing is the blood after they took a sample. We don't know which stain they're referring to though. There were actually about 4 or 5 stains on the ignition which appear to be blood. The one by the ignition keyhole. But we don't know that was the stain they're referring to. There are 4 or 5 stains on the ignition near the keyhole. Really? Show us pics. I am talking about the main one right to the left of it. Okay, here is a picture. Link. There's a circle around each blood-stained. Canuck 64 actually spoke to Jerry Buting and discovered evidence that when the police said they swabbed the stain on the ignition before taking a picture, they were actually referring to a stain other than the big stain. They didn't test those minute stains. The stain and pic I talk about is the big one, which shows 2 swab dots with swipes going in different directions. That pic you see is Steven's blood by the ignition after a sample was taken by La. I don't believe he ever thought anyone was going to find the car. Well, yeah, but how could he think no one would find it when it was so badly hidden, yet he cleaned everything up so well the labs didn't find shit in his house? To me, in the case or Avery, either the state of Wisconsin's have very, very idiotic cops, or Avery is half genius, half Forrest Gump. If that was true, he would have an extraordinarily low level of intelligence. It's really difficult to understand how someone can be that dumb but clean up the crime scene so well. Brendan's IQ is higher than his. So, how did he manage to clean up the crime scene so thoroughly? Bleach? I guess that must have been with bleach from the bottle with the red stain on the bottom that was not blood. Do you realize how ridiculous that sounds? It could be that bottle and there could be a stain on it that isn't blood, or it could be a bottle that wasn't found. Why would I know this? Lots of it could be there. You can say it could be anything about anything without any convincing evidence. I guess if Brendan, the learning disabled low IQ minor who gave many fanciful made-up answers in his responses, decided to say they used bleach to clean it up, then it must be true/s. Even if they did use bleach, which I don't believe, they still did an amazingly thorough job. Not just every molecule of blood spatter, but also things like hairs, etc. I said it could be the bleach bottle you're claiming it isn't. Not could be anything. My God. I'm not arguing this with you. It's ridiculous. Sure, it's ridiculous to have an opinion, based on the evidence, that the bleach cleanup job story is not at all sufficiently proven to be acceptable. Far from it. For me, it's one of many aspects in the mix that contribute to an overall conclusion that there is considerable reasonable doubt as to whether SA and BD are guilty. Technically, you're basing your opinion on lack of evidence. Evidence sure is a pretty good basis for forming an opinion, winking face. Yes, it is. You're not looking at evidence. 'Cause Brendan said so is not persuasive evidence to me. Cool story, bro. Weirdest thing with the case to me is how much evidence there is, but they couldn't find a reliable timeline other than Brendan's story. I guess if Brendan, the learning disabled low IQ minor. He's not that low IQ. He had some demonstrated deficits at the time, but is an average intelligence person. People love to act as though his deficits means he couldn't tell the truth or every response of his is invalid, but in fact lots of people may lie or otherwise vary in their accuracy in interrogations and yet tell both the truth and lies in the same sessions. Who gave many fanciful made-up answers in his responses decided to say they used bleach to clean it up, then it must be true/s. It may be. However, this sentence, which seems to imply that nothing he says can be considered true, is not. Even the DA thought his story was all over the place. They thought they got that witness who's going to erase any doubt, but ended up with an unreliable idiot who can't stay consistent. He was consistent at times, and couldn't be convinced to lie. What they got on film is not consistent, at least from what I've seen. He looks like Hess making shit up as he goes. It's the same when Hess in court. Yet when he was asked about Teresa's tattoo, he refused to lie about it. How did you determine that he refused to lie about it as much as he had no chance of guessing someone's tattoo? He was told what tattoo she allegedly had, and he refused to agree to it. Who alleged she had a tattoo? Fassbender. Link. Nowhere in there does it say he was told what her tattoo was, only where it was. I repeat, how was he supposed to guess what it was? Your repetition doesn't change my point. He wouldn't agree to state something he had no way of knowing. So we agree he had no way of knowing? Yep. I've said this about 50 times, so once again I will say it. But you do realize him being innocent would be a very obvious explanation as to why he didn't have the opportunity to observe her stomach, right? I don't understand by what twisted logic his lack of knowledge about the victim indicates guilt. Whatever his IQ may be, any factual statement he made needs to be treated with skepticism. Even if you think SA is guilty, you should be alert that not everything BD says makes sense. Impossible. No amount of bleach or scrubbing would ever rive that travesty of a garage from all that evidence. Impossible. Oh, are you a crime scene expert? Where did I claim to have knowledge I don't have? I rest my case, smiley face. Don't speculate, and then be surprised when someone else speculates. You got that Dassy IQ. I'm not speculating. You're making claims you can't possibly know. And you're not a crime scene expert, so how could you possibly know I'm wrong? Do you see the irony in your pretentious attitude? What's the point of having Reddit and making discussion if you are always going try and cause discord? Hey, if you got hate in your heart, let it out, I guess. Edit. I'm not speculating. Bleach. LMFAO. I believe what the actual experts believe. Do you see the irony of accusing me of being hateful while you insult me? Yet somehow I'm the one making things up. Okay. Darvo. Look it up. Are you? And whilst thoroughly cleaning the garage with bleach etc., he somehow managed to miss the bullet. And let's not forget Avery's bedroom, where according to Brendan she was tortured etc. And yet that messy, trailer bedroom was somehow thoroughly cleaned to get rid of any evidence. All that evidence. You mean like the faint glow of luminol? Or the bullets? Where are the bleach stains at in the bedroom? I don't know what I don't know. I've never claimed to. It is impossible for me to know anything about the crime that the evidence or the perpetrators don't show us. And I certainly cannot speak to the lack of something. I'm pretty sure the presence of a large amount of bleach at a crime scene would be immediately obvious. And yet the forensic team found no evidence of bleach. If they had, the prosecution team would have used this evidence at the trial. Lack of evidence isn't evidence. When it comes to Brendan's clearly coerced confessions, with zero evidence to give credibility to those coerced confessions, lack of evidence should have been a major factor in Brendan's trial. A federal appellate judge said that watching the interrogations that resulted in Brendan's confessions made her skin crawl. Watching the police, and even worse, the man employed by Len Krakinski to ensure he didn't deviate from the police confession, not only made my skin crawl, but also made me very angry. It's up to a jury to decide whether or not they believe a confession. They believed him. He burned everything if that's considered cleaning. Today the internet learned that stupid people have low intelligence and don't think things through. Pass it on. Today the internet learned that some people on the internet don't read very closely before commenting. The point is to contrast his really stupid actions with his apparently really intelligent ones. Really intelligent ones? Really? You said this, huh? It's not just the cleanup job. It's the way he conducts himself, and every word that comes out of his mouth, while being questioned about the case or discussing the case. If he was guilty, he successfully put a huge amount of ongoing mental effort into what he said to everyone to sound innocent. To the point of even saying subtle things to other people that made it sound like he was innocent. Calling TH's car key her keys, plural, to make it sound like he's never seen them. Not saying he would be a genius, just that this would require a high level of thinking over a long period. Which would be exhausting. And which is totally inconsistent with how absolutely dumb he was at hiding the really big ticket evidence. How absolutely dumb he was at hiding the really big ticket evidence. Except according to the state, he was a master forensic cleaner. Needing only 5 days to eradicate only the incriminating DNA from 2 sets of cuffs while leaving unrelated third-party DNA behind. Exactly. How can you clean up like he did, and at the same time miss the big incriminating evidence he did? It makes no sense at all. You ever hear of projection? Steve Avery does not possess the skills you're attributing to him, you're projecting these qualities onto him to fit your narrative. I'm projecting is one of the most disappointing explanations I've ever heard for why S.A. was able to put a lot of mental effort into his ongoing lies and be dumber than a brick at the same time. Why do you think it takes an extraordinary effort to tell lies? Your keys example is clearly just you seeing what you want to see. I'm sure Avery isn't the first person to refer to a single vehicle key as keys. He says a boatload of things in recorded jail calls that don't make anyone think he's innocent, by the way. It takes mental effort to keep up a lie over time. After listening to all his interviews and jail calls, it became apparent to me that if he was guilty, he was doing a good job at keeping all the lies up and watching everything he said. The effort required to do that doesn't seem compatible with some of the extreme stupidity he apparently showed in other ways if he was guilty. The car keys is very relevant, and this is not a matter of how someone generally talks. It's a matter of specific knowledge he had. If S.A. killed Th and hid that very important object, he would not refer to it as keys plural. Unless he was very clever and knew to say things like that to establish innocence. Again, you're seeing what you want to believe. For years, Avery's supporters have brushed off him saying Th came to his trailer to collect the money in a TV interview, and completely ignored him saying I wouldn't do nothing like that when Th was simply reported missing. The excuse was always, that's just how he talks. Now, when he uses a very common reference of keys when we have no idea if it was really keys or just a key, it's not the way he talks, but rather proof that he'd have to be a lying criminal mastermind to do something like that. Lol. Steven Avery never said that during his TV interview. I'm aware that guilters keep claiming that he did, but he simply never said that. If that was true that S.A. actually admitted Th walked up to his trailer, people would have made a huge deal about it at the time. It never happened. He did. Who would have made a big deal of it? I'm not going around in circles. He did not say this. You sensed I was setting you up for your it would have been a huge deal nonsense? Lol. I'm sure you know, Avery said the same thing to Remiker on November 4th, which Remiker testified to at Avery's trial. It was not a huge deal as the prosecution didn't make a big deal out of Steve saying both that he paid her at the car, and paid her at his trailer. It was not a huge deal, as the defense did not present any evidence that Avery paid her at the car, not at his trailer. For some reason, it's a big deal to Avery fans because they think Bobby the star witness sunk Avery by saying he saw Th walk toward his trailer, when everyone knows that's also what Steve said. I didn't sense you were setting me up. Unlike some people, I'm not actually here to try and scheme and plot conversations, rolling eyes face. I've seen you discuss this very topic before. I know how it will go because you always say the same thing. I'll say show me the actual transcript of the words where he says that. Because he never said that, you will type out a sentence where he talks about what Th usually did in the past. Then when I point out that this is him describing what usually happened in the past, and how he's merely making a comment about how brief their encounters were, you will perform an act of mental gymnastics to try and argue this is him saying Th went to his trailer on October 31st. Forgive me if I sound salty, but I've seen you discuss this before and try to twist S.A.'s words around and it's tiring and boring. Lol. I'm not twisting his words, and clearly Avery agrees, since that is also what he told Remiker. I'm not sure if you're familiar with all the trial transcripts or police reports. It sounds like you haven't read them all, so I'll fill you in. Unbelievably, Remiker wrote 2 different versions of his report. One of them, with the alleged incriminating statement by S.A., wasn't even disclosed to the defense. So he wrote that, but then MTSO decided not to go with it as the official story to give the defense. That's the dubious character of the Leos we are dealing with here. Their integrity is extremely low. When Remiker blurted this out at trial, a very unusual thing happened. KK did not bat an eyelid. Isn't that strange, that Remiker apparently was testifying as to important incriminating information about SA, and KK didn't care to highlight it at all? It's fairly obvious KK didn't wish to, because he knew Remiker was having trouble figuring out what story he was meant to tell. These guys have no credibility. They're an embarrassment to good police. Strang picked up on the BS and eventually the matter was privately settled with KK. Remiker's testimony was so bad, it's clear that asking for a mistrial was something Strang was contemplating. Remiker equals a joke on this topic. Lol. Egg calling TH's car key her keys, plural, to make it sound like he's never seen them. Maybe they were keys, originally. We really can't know. So Avery wasted 5 days cleaning all traces of TH from the trailer for nothing? If you say so. The evidence says so. I thought you followed the evidence? I do. I wasn't referring to the evidence, I was referring to you calling it a waste of time. The evidence says Avery spent 5 days cleaning all traces of TH from the trailer. Why do you ignore that? Why are you refusing to understand what I'm saying? The evidence says Avery spent 5 days cleaning all traces of TH from the trailer. Do you agree or disagree? What's your point? My new point is that you can't even answer a simple question. Cool story, bro. Waste someone else's time. As big a waste of time as arguing why someone in jail for life is guilty? Bye now. Wow, you really are something else, Lamau. You am right and I follow evidence. Then why and what evidence? You guys don't follow evidence. I'm not arguing with you. You came into this post with no intention of having any actual conversation, did you? Why would he think that when the car was by the crusher and his brothers used the crusher all the time? He's not very bright. Indeed. His brother Earl confirmed the RAV4 wasn't in that location days prior when hunting that area of the salvage yard. If true, he may have moved it there sometime after that night from its previous location, which I believe was along the service road behind his trailer, which runs straight down to the salvage yard obscured by the row of trees. 1. He's not very smart, his IQ is lower than Brendan's. 2. What was he to do with the car exactly? That's why it doesn't make sense. It's totally clean in his house. But forgot to clean the blood up. Why so many pieces here and there? He spent 18 years in jail. I think he would have learned a better thing or two on crime. Hello, it looks like you've made a mistake. It's supposed to be could've, should've, would've, short for could have, would have, should have, never could've, would've, should've. Or you misspelled something, I ain't checking everything. Beep boop, yes, I am a bot, don't bot criminate me. What blood? You mean his own blood in the bathroom? Why would he worry about cleaning his own blood up? Being in prison doesn't mean he's going to be smarter and better at crime. Because he was never in that car. While I don't know why he wouldn't have attempted to clean, it's not out of the realm of possibility to cut yourself and drip blood without noticing. I think we've all been there at some point. You look down, see blood, think oh God, where did I cut myself, see the cut, and then it starts hurting a few minutes later. Need to test the RAV again to hopefully put this to rest. There have been a lot of crime scenes throughout history where the killer didn't clean his blood up. Do you know the name of any of those cases or have any links to where I can find out about those cases? He may not have known he was bleeding. I cut my forearm in a shop accident. Felt like a scratch and gone. Didn't know I was bleeding until I felt the blood inside my glove. 16 stitches on the skin, 10 stitches to the cut muscle. He may have known, but how do you find all the blood and clean it out of carpets and upholstery? Human blood was identified in 12 locations between the front and back seat. Some of those were DNA tested and came back as Avery's. That would be a lot of blood for him to find and attempt to clean in some way, presumably in the dark with no lights. Best he could hope for is that nobody finds the RAV. Everything else he simply burned or hid. No evidence was found of a cleanup in either the garage or trailer. Ertl testified that he did not get a bleach reaction, bright and fast in the garage. Instead he got a faint reaction. I know it reacts with some metals, copper and lead in particular. Transmission fluid might have some metals ground into it, so it's possible. Because he is innocent. Avery thought the flakes were bloody dandruff. Brendan used all Steven's cleaning supplies cleaning up the garage. I think Steven Avery didn't wipe away his traces, blood, thoroughly enough. He also doesn't look like a cleaning devil, rather untidy. But only my opinion. Think about it, if he went as far as cremating her body, cleaning his bedroom and garage absolutely spotless of blood, saliva, and all DNA, why would he keep her RAV4 with his blood in it? Note, no fingerprints were found inside or outside of it, and put the key on his nightstand. This is just too convenient, and they conducted 6 or 7 searches prior to finding this stuff, all found on the last search. In fact, I think all of the bones, the RAV4, the blood smear, and the key was found on the 7th or 8th search. Note, they found a trail of human bones leading from the hunting camp that Bobby Dassey frequented all the way to Avery's burn pit but never documented it. Quoting it didn't apply to this case, so go figure.